I have these list of discussion ideas that whenever FGO gets a little bit slow, I like to kind of break out and make some videos on, ranging from things that I would like to see in FGO or things that kind of revolve around the topic for today's video that, oddly enough, I did get the idea from reading some of the comments on yesterday's video, which I know, I did kind of mess up a little bit. I don't think I worded my points as well as I probably could have, and I do deserve to be clowned on for that. But again, I'm always glad that if I do say something that's a little bit more out of pocket, or I don't express something in the correct manner, that people will kind of keep me in check and say, hey man, you should really probably take that one back to the kitchen and let it marinate for a little bit longer. But as you can tell by the title of this video, it's talking about if farming is all that important in FGO, but it really should be why farming is as important as it is in FGO, and I wanted to kind of break that down. Because whenever a new servant comes out, I feel like everybody, including myself, I'm guilty of this, goes down a checklist of, okay, what does this servant have? Do they have the battery that's going to allow them to farm? Do they have good looping capabilities if they are an arts or a quick unit? Or if they're a buster servant, do they actually have that 50% battery to make it really convenient? Or maybe at the very least a 30% so you can use them with the append skill and whatnot. And some of the first videos you'll see coming out for servants is not whether or not they're really good in specific challenge quests or if they can help you with a specific boss, but it's, can this servant farm, normal 3-3-3 nodes, which for newer players, that is just 3 waves of enemies with 3 enemies on each wave. It doesn't really matter if the last node doesn't have 3 enemies because obviously you're done with the stage at that point. But I wanted to kind of go over this and discuss, at least from my perspective, more on the content creation side, why it seems farming is as important as it is. So make sure you sit down, get comfortable. We're going to have ourselves a decent discussion. Do the like, do the subscribe, all that good stuff, and get your comment ready, because after I go over my points, I'd love to read over some of your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. But first and foremost, we need to kind of go over what farming actually means, because some people might just think, oh, it's 3-turn farming, but technically farming is just you running a stage numerous times in a row. It doesn't matter if you're doing it in 3 turns, 5 turns, 10 turns, doesn't really matter. If you're running the same stage with the goal of getting a specific drop in mind, then you are farming. And a lot of new players, including myself when I started the game, don't really gravitate towards that 3-turn farming setup. You're usually just using the servants and enjoying the pretty animations that they're starting to get, as we go further and further along. Noble Phantasms are starting to look a little bit better. Some of the animations are falling off a little bit, but they used to go back and do these things called animation updates that made some of the more older servants look a lot better, but now they're adding, subtitles to NPs, and they added subtitles to skills. So maybe you also want to get some extra dialogue or lore from all the different skills, and you just enjoy, who cares if it takes me 10 turns to farm? For Da Vinci Lotto, when I played that, I did 8-turn runs with Astolfo because that was just the best rider I had. He had a big battery and he did pretty good damage because he was NP3. But eventually everybody will hit this wall as they're doing, however long their farming is, your 5-turn farm, your 7-turn farm, however long it is. And this is not just something that is for FGO, it's anything that you're going to be playing. Whether you're playing an MMO, an RPG, or just another mobile game, eventually you'll hit the wall of, I want to do this more efficiently, because doing the same thing and it kind of taking me a long time to get this done isn't as fun as it used to be, especially as, maybe you're starting to get the same dialogue over and over again and you kind of got it a bit more memorized. It's not as fresh as it used to be. And so for FGO, that's where 3-turn farming comes in, because again, most free quests only have 3 waves on them. And so the fastest way for you to get that done is to farm them in under 3 turns, taking out a wave every single turn, which is where I think the power for servants like Koya and Skya, Castoria and Scotty comes in, because while they do all have pretty strong kits, it's their ability to allow you to do that very consistently and very easily is what I think puts a lot of value in them. If you look at anybody's tier list, again, including my own, I'm also guilty of this, one of the primary reasons you'll get, oh, this servant is really good, they're S tier, EX tier, whatever have you, is that they can help you do buster farming, quick farming, arts farming, and they'll help you get that stage done as fast as possible. Even though some of those servants, like say Castoria, also have really good applications when it comes to challenge quests, and why people feel that someone like Merlin needs to have a buff, because even though Merlin is perfectly fine, I still use him to this day in whatever team comps when I go into challenge quests. The fact that he's not super primed good for 3-turn farming is the reason people are asking, well, maybe give him a little bit more of a battery, or maybe let him give more to our party so I can bring him to my farming setups. It's also why, despite the fact that I think Tamamo is still very, very strong, if you want to go ahead and bring her to CQs, you can find very good success with that. But it's the reason that you don't really see her brought to anything because, well, sure, I could bring her to this challenge quest or this advanced quest or this boss fight, but she's not going to allow me to farm. So if she's on raid up, I might skip her, it's kind of the general consensus I will start to find for more mid-range to late game players. But aside from it being very convenient, it's also just a reality of the situation that if you're going to get serious at all about either version of FGO, doing 3-turn farming is really going to become a necessity for you because you're going to need to farm a lot to start clearing out these event shops to, really maximize going in on lottos. The only people that I really feel aren't super affected by the whole quote-unquote farming brain rot, as a lot of the community will call it, are the people that really just log in to play the story, and that's about it. But I have very rarely found people that just log in to only play the story and read it. Most of them eventually get hooked into the gacha and start pulling for servants that start to catch their eye. And so eventually they also get pulled into doing the farming and trying to get everything done as fast as possible. But it can be very frustrating sometimes because it does feel that if a servant is not very good at farming, they almost get left on the cutting room floor. They're not really considered for any teams. I mean, we talked about, say, Merlin and Tamamo, who people are, really saying, oh, give these guys a buff so they can really help me out in farming, when it seems that that's not what they're interested in having them do. They seem fairly content to allow Castori to be the arts guy, for Koyan's guy to be the buster guy, and for Scotty and plus Ruler Scotty to be the quick guys. But this also really happens for a lot of DPS servants as well. I mean, there was a couple of years back that I was watching a Sigurd solo for the Kama Beast fight, and I was like, that's really cool that someone like Surtur, who's not really considered to be that great of a servant, was able to solo that fight on his own. But again, because his skill set is admittedly a bit wonky, he's almost never really considered for things, and on top of all that, he doesn't have a battery, so you can't even use him for single target farming against some of the 90++ nodes where you might just have a 1-1-1 node where it's just one enemy on every single node that you're really going to want a single target to be looping their NP to take them out, as they'll do more damage generally than your AoEs. There's obviously some AoEs that break that mold, different discussion for a different day. But it does feel very unfortunate because I even recently fell into a very similar trap when Takeda Shingen came out, because he was looking like he could have been the next Drake. All of his skills were kind of pointing him in that direction. He had the large battery, he had some offensive buffs, but he also had some really good defensive options as well. So kind of like Drake having, say, the NP gain and the Pierce invincibility that are really good going into challenge quests. He had that, but seemingly a little bit better. But I kind of jumped on the bandwagon of, oh, this guy is completely mid, as soon as I saw that his damage was pretty low. I was like, oh, you can't even use him for farming. You're not really going to be able to use him for anything. Which I think is a gross overreaction on my part, because just because they're not good in a farming setup doesn't mean they can't be good going into, again, you got your CQs for every event, you have boss fights for story chapters, you have advanced quests, you have the new Bleached Earth missions that they're, I guess, kind of rolling out rather slowly, but they are there, and you could definitely bring him to some of those fights and other servants that are like him. And I also wanted to take this as a bit of an introspective moment for myself. I kept saying that farming is 90% of the game, but I don't even know if that's mathematically true anymore, because they are rolling out more difficult content. I've been one of those people crying out that I would like to have more stages to test out units on and see how good they are, but they have been delivering in a way. Every single event brings a new challenge quest at least. Sometimes they bring out 2. Story chapters are a little bit more rare, but they do bring a decent bit of varied fights, and even when those aren't up, you can't go back and fight those bosses, which, again, I think they should make those memorial quest things more permanent. I think that would be a very good idea. But even without that, again, they've added the Bleached Earth challenge quest missions, which are kind of fun to do. I recently did the Durian Donna challenge quest, and it was kind of fun to actually have an excuse to break out Nocnaria, the new foreigner that we got for last JP Summer, who I had never really had a reason to use, because as an AoE, I would just use Summer Ibuki, who I recently got to NP2 on the Destiny Order summon, and so I had no reason to actually bring her to any quest, but it was a stage full of Berserkers, she's a foreigner, and she can actually kind of loop good, consistent damage on them, despite being 1-1-1. I think it would have been a lot easier if I did raise her skills, but it was nice to have a reason to break her out for those. And again, they do keep adding more things like advanced quests, but those can always feel a little gimmicky. So I don't know if I want to write a full free pass on them for those, because some of them can be a bit frustrating to do. But as frustrating as they might be, it does show that certain servants do thrive in those environments. You know, the Medea one actually forced me to kind of take a step back and plan for how I wanted to take down the fight, because it is something you're going to be in for a very long time. And so while farming is still a majority of the game if you're going to be heavily invested in it, I don't think it's something that moving forward that I'm going to be like, oh, this is something we only have to focus on. It only has to be, can they farm, which at some point I will probably fall back into. Every now and then I'll be like, oh, well, this unit can't farm, but I'd rather it be more of a sub point to the unit. And maybe we could talk about some of their other extra strengths that they have, that not being able to farm, maybe they gain something else. Maybe they are just really exceptional going into challenge quests. I think a good example of that is someone like Andromeda, who just came out, who can farm decently well. You know, she's not the craziest, but she's not bad. Quick will always really get slandered, and again, that's probably another topic for another day, but I see Andromeda as almost a servant that fills a niche that we almost don't have a need for at the moment, as she is very, very tanky, but it's almost like we don't need someone to be able to tank the level of damage that she has the ability to tank. But again, her, and similarly Ushi Gozen, who is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, that she does really insane damage, especially to Earth attribute servants, kind of got swept under the rug, partially because she's quick, but also she's not the craziest farmer. You know, we already have people like Senno Rikyu, who is an insane AoE quick looper. You know, if you're going to use somebody, you're probably going to stick with her. Or if you've already got, say, an NP3 Dantes, you're probably just going to still use him for that. It might not even consider rolling for her, unless you really do like Samurai Remnant and you thought Ushi Gozen was sick. And I thought she was pretty sick. Again, different discussion for another day. But this is just something that I've been marinating on for a while. And trying to gather my thoughts as much as I could. I wrote down some note cards, as you guys might be able to tell. It felt a little bit more structured, at least to me. And I wanted to get the community's thoughts on this, specifically, my community, but if anybody else wants to chip in, that's perfectly fine, on just why it's as important as it is, because I understand that it's one of those things that it makes your life a lot more convenient, but it's almost seemed to become a little too important that certain servants get knocked out before they even release. We get some of their details and they're not even out for a few days and they're just complete gutter trash by the community. They're just considered not usable, when I don't really think we've gotten an unusable servant for the longest time, which is kind of why I like the discussion around Popish Joanna. Even though she wasn't the craziest looper, we just kind of threw in the category of, well, she's good, just not really needed. And I think that's more of a better way to categorize some servants, because it might also be very confusing to newer players. Maybe they're thinking that someone like Popish Joanna is really cute, or they really like Andromeda, they really like her design and they want to go for her, but then people are like, nah, she's mid, she's really bad. When in reality, it should be more of a nuanced discussion of, well, you're going to want to do this 3-turn farming, and Andromeda can kind of help you out with that, but an area that she really can help you out in is this over here. And then talk about, well, she is very tanky, that's very good, but it's something that we don't really have a use for, I suppose, at this point, because none of the bosses are hitting so ridiculously hard that you just gotta have this dedicated tank that can take even the normal attacks from the bosses. But I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on this in the comments down below. And I'm not trying to rally everybody in the FGO community or anything. These discussions are things that I just kind of think of, like to marinate on, and kind of write notes and pick the brain of some of my friends and then come out and make these videos. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you have anything else that you'd like me to discuss, drop that in the comments down below as well. I'm working on a set of discussions for just things that I would like to see FGO incorporate from other different gacha games that I think would work really well for our game over here. So if you have any of those ideas as well, and as long as I've played those gacha games and I kind of understand what you're wanting them to incorporate, I might also make discussion videos on those as well. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I might put these in a different playlist for more, I guess, thought out discussions that I do instead of the normal FGO discussions playlist, because as things kind of get quieting down, I don't want to make, the 5th video on some random server I've already covered 1,000 times. I'd rather put something new out there for the community. But with that being said, I'm going for real this time. I know I do like to ramble at the end of these videos. I'm kind of deviating away from my notes, as you could tell, but I'll catch you guys in the next video.